Well, everyone always asks me about the weather the first time they see me, so let's give you an update on that. And basically, it's continued the way it has been for pretty much all of the winter. Unusually warm, lovely blue skies, temperatures in the mid to high 20s. It's not even getting that cool at night at the moment. But having said all of that, we do have a yellow warning for big waves this weekend, Saturday in fact. AEMET has issued a yellow weather warning for waves of 4 to 5 metres, which is pretty big, off the coast, and they're being caused by strong northeasterly winds, which are expected to start in the early hours of Saturday morning and run through until Saturday afternoon or early evening. The winds are going to be 50 to 60 kilometres per hour. Well, for those of you who live in or enjoy spending time in Playa Blanca, I have good food shopping news for you. Aldi, the supermarket chain, are in the process of getting permission to build a new one of their stores in Playa Blanca, and it's in the Urbanización Marcastel area, which is kind of up towards the marina end of town. So the opposite end of town to where Lidl is currently being worked on, which is in the kind of industrial area as you first come into Playa Blanca. The new Aldi store will be 2,000 square metres on a plot of 23,000 square metres. But we have no idea yet when construction will even start on that, but they're in the early stages of gaining approval for that, and that will give a bit more choice down in Playa Blanca. I think what most people really would like in Playa Blanca now is a Mercadona, and hopefully they'll be looking at the footfall and the potential customer base down there, and will decide to put a store down there in the not too distant future. Well, this weekend it's Aria Carnival. Now, I kind of always think of Aria as one of the best carnivals. It's a nicely compact one. The procession runs from the cemetery, which is where Cesar Manrique is buried, of course, into town, and that's a little bit less than a kilometre. So it's not a great long drawn out thing where everyone gets separated out and the line gets longer and longer and longer. It's all sort of over reasonably quickly, although it always starts late. But then the party starts in the plaza, which is where they end up, which is just always a very, very good party. So that's this Saturday. What's the right word? The broadcast start time is 6 p.m. Interestingly enough, it will be being covered live on Lanzarote television. If you're not coming to the carnival itself and you're able to get that channel and watch it, you can do so on Lanzarote television. But their broadcast starts at 6:30, so they probably know what I know, which is that it always starts late. Now, a very sad story this week, and that is the death of a woman in Costa Teguise who was hit by a bus in the area of Calle Taboriente, so in the kind of San Jacinto area of Costa Teguise. We don't know any more than she is of foreign nationality. She was hit by a bus early in the morning, about 9-10 a.m. The emergency services treated her at the scene. She was severely injured. She was transferred to hospital, but sadly died there a little bit later. Obviously, the police are investigating, and when we know more about the background to this and who she was and where she was from, we will let you know. But a very sad story this week from Costa Teguise. Now, thank you all for the comments you've been posting below these videos as we've been doing them for you. I find them very interesting. I read all of them, and where there's a question, I'm more than happy to reply. So if you have a burning question you want to know about Lanzarote or any of the news that I give out in these weekly videos, please pop a comment in below and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Well, cruise ship visitors were up 13% in January when compared to the same month last year. We had a total of 71,000 cruise ship passengers visiting the island in January. For some reason, the big cruise ships get a bit of a bad rep, and I don't really understand why. From the island's point of view, they're actually very good because they bring a lot of people, in this case 71,000 people, to Lanzarote. A percentage of them will book the ship's excursions, which use local companies to go and visit, the major attractions like Jamios del Agua and so on. A percentage will hire a car and see a bit of Lanzarote for themselves, and quite a chunk, and we saw them when we were in Arrecife this week, will actually just wander around the resort. Will wander around the capital and spend money in shops, bars and restaurants and stuff like that. And then at the end of it all, they go back to their ship and off they go sailing for another time, for another port. Now, what I like about cruise ship passengers is they're not actually using our resource. So they're not, using the water of the island. They're not staying in hotels and using electricity and stuff like that. They're literally in and out in a day, and they spend a sizable amount of money here while they do it. So it feels like a win-win to me. It's a way of having more people exposed to Lanzarote without taking up space and using our natural resources and stuff like that. But I'd be interested to hear if you think differently, and perhaps that you can tell me, why you think differently and what the reason is you don't like the cruise ships. And next up, we've got a story about defibrillators. Now, I struggle to say that, but those are the machines, as I'm sure you know, that you can attach to somebody's chest when they're having a heart attack. And if the heart stops, they will provide an electrical boost that will kickstart their hearts. And they are being installed in all of the island's major attractions. So again, that's Mirador del Rio, Jamios del Agua, Timanfaya and so on. They will all have these machines available to be used to anybody who requires emergency medical assistance, and the staff will be trained to use them. Total cost of this is around 18,000 euros, and they're being installed now in all of the major attractions. And next up, you probably won't know the name, Javier Rees Akuna. But I bet you've seen some of his photos if you're someone who is interested in Lanzarote. This is a book of his photographs that Julie brought me some time ago. I apologise for it being backwards, by the way. Obviously, I'm facing into the camera, but I'll put some images from it into the video when I edit it a little bit later. Now, I say I bet you've seen his photos. Let me tell you a bit about his story. His story. Javier was born here in Lanzarote. He died this week aged 97, which is why I'm talking about him. But he's known as the photographer of Lanzarote. He lived here in the north of the island, in Aria, and in the 1940s, he set up a photography studio in Aria. And if you lived on the island or in the north of the island in that period through to the 1970s, you would have gone to his studio in order to get your photograph taken for your passport or your ID card or your driver's license. He also did weddings, and he did confirmations and all that kind of stuff. But what he became really famous for was his photos of the people of the north of Lanzarote from the 50s right up until, well, maybe 10 years ago. And they are just fantastic. And you'll see a lot of them on the website memoriadelanzarote.com, memoriadelanzarote.com, I should say. And also in this fabulous book that I showed you at the beginning, there are hundreds, literally hundreds of his photos in there, including the iconic one that I'm sure you've seen of the ladies carrying baskets of fish on their heads, walking up from La Graciosa to exchange them for baskets of salt from the people of Lanzarote. So a sad day that he has gone, but it just reminds us to buy his book, go and have a look at his images online, and you can see the history of Lanzarote over 40, 50, 60 years. Absolutely amazing man. Now, I mentioned last week that there was a new housing law that had a couple of interesting proposals in it. Well, I'm delighted to say that this week it actually passed into law, which is remarkably fast for the Canarian government. On Tuesday it was passed into law. And there are two provisions that I was expecting and I'm really happy about, and a third that I wasn't expecting, which I think is a really interesting one. The first of them is that the government will now have the opportunity to purchase properties where the developer has gone bust partway through the build, or the bank has repossessed a property partway through the build. The government will be able to buy them and finish off the work and put them over to affordable housing. The second provision is that the government will be able to reclassify some rustic land as urban land that can be built on. We have two types of land here. Urban land you can build on and you can get planning permission for without too much of an issue, but we have a lot of rustic land which it's very hard to get any kind of permission to build on. Well, the government will be able to give approvals for building on some limited rustic land as long as a percentage of what's built on there provides affordable housing for the local population. But the third one that I didn't see coming, which I think is quite clever and quite sensible, is that the government will also now be able to change the use of commercial property to residential. And again, I know this is really, really hard, if not impossible to do, because I've had clients look into it in the past and they've given up in the end. So what does this mean? Well, as an example, if you tour Costa Teguise or Puerto del Carmen, there are a number of the old centros comercial, little kind of shopping centres with nooks and crannies and stuff like that, which are really quite run down now, and they've got a lot of empty units in them, and some of them have been empty for years and years. And where one of those units has been empty for a year or more, the government will be able to offer a license to change the use of that property from commercial to residential. So, I mean, for example, there's a little commercial centre right on the front, actually, in Puerto del Carmen, where probably half the units have been empty for more than a year. Now, how cool would it be to turn one of those little shop units into a small apartment, front line to the ocean, and be able to live in it? So I've got my fingers crossed that that law is applied and used sensibly, and I'm sure it will be. Now, we had some interesting news this week from the manager of Cesar Manrique Airport. Her name is Maria Teresa Cuenca, and Maria Teresa was talking about an investment of around 140 million euros in the airport over the next few years. And we knew some of the things she's talked about, but there is some new stuff that I wasn't aware of. So the stuff that we knew about was that Terminal 1 is going to have more check-in desks. The security area is going to be increased in size, and there are going to be more international gates. I drove past the airport this morning, and there were probably 6 international flights not on air bridges, so they were parked on the apron, which means buses have got to move people to and from them and stuff like that. So I don't know whether we'll be able to cope with dramatically more, but there are going to be more air bridges. Something I didn't know that she talked about that they are doing is making the furniture on the air side of the airport more comfortable. And I know exactly what she means. I mean, they're very serviceable, the seats there, but they're not that comfortable, are they? Particularly if you're sitting there for an hour or so, hour or more, and you end up with fairly sore bum cheeks. So they are being replaced. And the other thing I didn't know, which was a real surprise to me, is that Terminals 1 and 2 are now going to be connected airside. So when you get on an inter-island flight in Terminal 2, you'll check in the normal way, go through security on that terminal, but when you come out the other side, you'll be able to walk along the corridor into Terminal 1 and use the facilities there. And by the way, while we're talking about the facilities in T1, a KFC opened there this week, so there is already work going on and new stuff coming into the airport. Next up, we've got, believe it or not, the story of the Gravedigger of Tinajo. Now, I kind of feel like I should have ghost music playing now. But I guess it isn't funny, but in a way it is. The man who is employed by Ayuntamiento de Tinajo as the Gravedigger was busted this week as a drug dealer. And Policia Nacional launched an investigation into him. He's 57 years old, by the way, and his partner was also arrested. She is also 57 years old. And police found, I think it was half a kilo of cocaine, a third of a kilo of marijuana, and 21,000 euros in cash on his premises. So he's going to be in trouble, I guess, assuming he is successfully prosecuted as a drug dealer. Now, if you're enjoying this video, please can I ask you to hit the subscribe button below. I said it before and I'll probably say it again, but Lanzarote Information, which is our website, has a fantastic social media following, literally hundreds of thousands of people, but our YouTube channel is not in the same league, and I'd really like to grow our audience on YouTube because it will make it more fun and more interesting to keep doing these weekly news bulletins every week. So please hit the subscribe button. There's also a notification bell that you can click if you want to be notified every time we post a new video, so that you can see what's the latest on your favorite island. And our final story this week is about jellyfish in Playa Grande. Now, these are actually Portuguese men of war, but there were only a few seen and they disappeared within a couple of days, and they were relatively small ones. So don't get stressed about it. But the reason I mention it is that the lifeguards are really good at getting feedback and finding out when there are jellyfish on a particular beach, and they will raise the jellyfish flag. And it's fairly obviously a sort of cartoon drawing of a jellyfish. If you see that flag, you know that there may be jellyfish in the water on that particular beach. And I wanted to make a couple of points to you. The first is that it doesn't mean they're on a whole coastline. So if we had them, as we did earlier this week in Playa Grande, if you go down the coast to Playa Chica, there probably won't be any. Or if you go up the coast the other way to some of the small coves going towards Playa Los Pasillos, there probably won't be any. They're really quite a localized thing when they happen. And I've got to tell you, I've been swimming in the ocean here for 23 years. I've swum hundreds and hundreds of miles. I've scuba dived hundreds of miles. I've pretty much lived in the ocean since we moved here, and I've only ever been stung by a jellyfish once. So please don't get stressed about it, but do look for the flags and perhaps go to another beach if you see them. Now, the arrival of these jellyfish has been blamed on the unusually high water temperatures. And interestingly enough, I do a lot of diving here, and normally at this time of year at depth, and by depth I'm talking 20 to 30 meters deep, the ocean temperature is normally around 17 degrees in February. I dived in the Yellow Submarine at Puerto Calero today, and we went down to 29 meters, and they have a little screen at each, I'm not supposed to call it a porthole, each viewing window? No, I can't remember the right words. At each porthole. And the screen gives you the water temperature as well as a lot of other really useful information. And the water temperature, even at 29 meters, was 21.5 degrees. So it's unusually warm at depth. And at the surface, it's 24 degrees, which is like summer. And that's what's being blamed on the jellyfish coming closer into shore than they normally would do. Well, that's it for this week. Hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.